with that, I will pass it on to our alumni to give some backgrounds about themselves. So we'll start with Kalpesh.
Oh, hi, everyone. I'm Kalpesh Kapadia, class of 1999, probably the oldest alum here. I'm originally from Mumbai, India, and I've been living in Palo Alto, California since 99. I moved to Bay Area, and I've been here. I run a company I founded called Deserve. Deserve is a credit card platform. It was a startup, but it's a mid-sized company, but it's still a private company right now. And we hire tons of Tepper alums. So in terms of a ratio, I think in terms of sheer size, Amazon probably has the most Tepper graduates, but in terms of the size of the company versus the number of Tepper folks, I have probably the most. Thanks.
PwC might try to give you a run for their money, but is another good one. But then let's go to Anisha.
And I sit on the board at Tepper, so
yes,
I come twice a year to campus. This year has been tough and challenging, so we've had virtual board meetings twice a year.
Hi, everybody. Anisha Sood. I am Tepper 2008, and happy to be part of the panel. I am based in Seattle, Washington. I work for a company called First Choice Health. So First Choice Health is a third-party administrator. So if you think about a health plan, we are the health plan that would be on your insurance card, for example. We're not as big as a Blues, but we're sort of a mid-sized company serving kind of health systems as well as smaller employers. So I am a Chief Financial and Strategy Officer. I joined First Choice 2 years ago. My background prior to joining is actually on the venture capital side. So I was doing venture capital investing in early stage healthcare technology and healthcare services companies. And then prior to that, my post MBA work was actually in investment banking. So I spent a number of years at Credit Suisse in their health and life sciences practice. So nice to meet everyone.
Excited to have you here. Neil, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Neil Rajdev. I'm the class of 2009. I overlapped with Anisha for a year. And good to see you here, Anisha. I studied finance and entrepreneurship and am currently based in Lincoln, Massachusetts, which is just outside the suburbs of Boston. I was most recently at a company called Indigo Agriculture. It's a kind of a unicorn category company that I was a very early employee. So I was the CEO's first hire. I was like in employee number 14 or 15. And now there's probably 1,500 people there. And it's a sort of an agricultural technology company, which is an emerging space, lots of venture money going in there. And I was there for just over 6 years and just left 2 months ago. And I will probably find my way to another early stage venture where I can be, employee number less than 10. I have a background in, before all this, I had a background in banking at Credit Suisse and Citigroup. And then I also had a consulting background. So it's great to be here with you and look forward to the discussion.
Awesome. Elliott, would you want to introduce yourself next?
Absolutely. Thanks, Steph. My name is Elliott Zielevski. Graduated from Tepper with my MBA in 2018. Also graduated from Carnegie Mellon undergrad in 2012, so a couple stints. Currently, I'm a portfolio manager at Dimensional Fund Advisors based in Charlotte, North Carolina. Dimensional Fund Advisors is a systematic investment manager, and we have mutual funds and other types of investment solutions. Prior to Tepper, in between my two CMU tours, I worked at Freddie Mac outside of DC as a credit analyst. So also in the financial space, and I focused on finance work at Tepper during my MBA in terms of the GFA, Alpha Asset Management Club, and the like.
Great, excited to have you here as well. And Jordan, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Happy to. Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Jordan Hopkins, Temper class of 2014. Recently, in the process of relocating to Atlanta from New York. So I've been in New York since business school, where I did healthcare investment banking at Barclays. I'm now on garden leave, and I'll be starting at Goldman Sachs in a couple of weeks, so taking some time off in between there. Prior to Tepper, I worked at JP Morgan in a kind of a strategy role in the asset management division, and also a stint in the private bank. And then previous to that, like many of you all, I studied engineering and somehow ended up in finance.
Thank you, everybody. I just want to remind everyone that they can add questions to the chat. And so we're going to go through a few prepped questions at the beginning. And then partway through, we'll transition over to the questions from the audience. So the first one I'm going to start with is, I'll give it to Anisha to start off, is thinking back to when you started your MBA, you likely shared some plan A, plan B goals that you might be thinking of doing. What were you thinking of doing at the time, and how or when did your plans change along the way?
You're making me think back a few years. So when I was applying to business school, so prior to going to business school, I worked for Accenture for a number of years, again, in healthcare, actually been in healthcare my whole career on the consulting side, and just was finding kind of what I was doing getting a little monotonous. And I was like, I really need a different perspective. And so when I was looking for business school, I wanted to get a broader business perspective. And one of the areas I wanted to focus in was actually finance. And so looking at strong finance programs, Tepper was definitely up there. And Tepper also actually ended up having at the time the healthcare track as well. So kind of being a perfect fit. I don't know that I knew, or I can't tell you what I put in my application to say, this is what I really want to do when I graduate from business school. Where I really figured it out was probably my summer internship. So I summered at Johnson & Johnson up in Raritan, New Jersey. I was actually in what was an unusual program, because there was a big sort of marketing program that would pull from a bunch of different business schools on the marketing side. And my role is actually in competitive intelligence. So I worked in their pharmaceutical group, looking at the market and looking at what competitors were doing and thinking about it strategically in terms of where they should go and what assets they should think about investing against. And as part of that program, I got to do a bunch of interviews, meet a bunch of people that worked there, and had a number of conversations throughout the summer, and kind of realized at the end of that summer that what I really wanted to do was to do deal work. And so realizing that the best way to do deals, M&A, anything like that, I think somebody laid it down for me very well, which is, well, if you want to do it in healthcare, and which I did, they're like, you can go be an MD, you can be a lawyer, or you can be a banker. I said, well, two of those are out. So I guess I'll go be an investment banker. And so I spent then the next year going up to New York, doing a number of interviews, and ended up finding a full-time role at Credit Suisse in investment banking. So got my share of deal work. I spent 5 years there, decided that being on the buy side was better than being on the sell side. So got to do it from a venture capital standpoint. And then during my venture capital, I'd say tour, about 6 years, decided I actually wanted to do the hard stuff and go into operations. So I would say it's still doing finance, but finance from an operational standpoint versus more from a deal and services standpoint.
Great. If anyone else wants to add about some of their pre-goals, that would be great, but otherwise we can move to another question. I'd say maybe for Kalpesh. So having worked with some startups, what would you say the biggest risk that you've taken in your career, and how has Tepper helped you prepare for that?
So I think I would answer it slightly differently. The right time to start a company is in your early 20s or in your early 40s. And the reason I say that is in your early 20s, you sort of don't have much to lose, and the opportunity cost is low. And you can sleep on your parents' couch and eat ramen noodles and get started and learn much more. I would say coming out of college or MBA, if the best thing you can do is start a company, and you can learn by doing. It's a different sort of or learning by osmosis rather than going through some training program and such. And at the time when I graduated, there was not, it was 1999, so it was Internet 1.0 boom, and a bunch of us, were enamored by Wall Street. So I joined Wall Street, and my goal was to make the most money for a few years. So I had a great offer from, I did my summer internship at Bear Stearns and in New York, and then I moved out west to Robert Stevens. So I did that for about 99 to 2013. And that time I was in my early 40s, and that felt like I had enough money saved up, and I wanted to do something on my own, and start a business and tech company. So in the mid 30s, you sort of have family and responsibility, and career aspirations and such. And now I'm doing this as it's like a third baby. We have two children, and this is like a third child, if you will, for me. So it's sort of entrepreneurship is a quiet taste for me. And I'm enjoying it because company's succeeding, but if it's not succeeding, it's really hard place to be. So if you are seasoned and have a lot of experience in life, you can take those knocks, or you're very early and so be it. It failed, you can go back and get a job.
That's a great one. One of the other things that we always like to hear about is what the day in the life post-graduation looks like. I know quite myself and all of my peers we're anxiously awaiting what it's going to look like for us, starting this summer or this fall. So maybe Neil, and then maybe Jordan after Neil, would you guys like to talk about what did you do yesterday or earlier this week in your roles?
Yeah, my answer is going to be a little bit different from everybody else because I'm like living a semi-retired life for a short period of time. But I'll say, for Kalpesh and Anisha at least, and I guess Jordan as well, like those of us who spent a little bit of time on Wall Street for many years, it was grueling, long hours that they still write about in the newspapers. So the culture hasn't changed that much as far as I know, but it was a lot of hours over a really long period of time that was really challenging. And then for me, I went into a startup thinking that would somehow be different, and it frankly was worse. So I think I have a personal problem versus like I don't think Wall Street has a problem as much as I have a personal problem with finding these types of things. Maybe I'll get it right this time, but I wouldn't trade those experiences at all. They were very formative for me, and I think they'll enable me to do really interesting things going forward. Your question was, what did I do yesterday? And I'll just share it with you because at some point you'll be able to enjoy something like this. It may not be for those who go into Wall Street. You may not enjoy it for 5 or 6 more years. But I did a lot of gardening yesterday, and I took my daughters on some bike rides. I've been reading a lot on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and then I talked to a couple of CEOs that are looking to recruit people to build companies. So I'm kind of sprinkling my day with like learning about what's out there that are in early stage ventures, and then just like having fun, with some hobbies.
It's interesting, Neil, you say that investment banks, there was an article yesterday about how Goldman Sachs CEO is realizing how people are working long hours, even work from home is like work 24/7. So generous to give a Saturday off to people, right? So I think nothing has changed.
It's funny. I thought that I didn't keep track of it. I was in banking until 2013. Anisha, you might have been maybe around the same time. And
yeah.
There was like a few years after that where, they took people's cell phone, they shut down their access over the weekends and stuff like that. And so I thought I had thought that it had gotten better, but it seems like it's gone back to the way it was, for a long time.
I remember getting a BlackBerry pager when I joined, and I was so excited. And my colleague told me that means they can reach you anytime now. The partner will be sitting in Hamptons, and you will have to be working in the office. And so that's that.
Yeah, I still get heart palpitations when I see the little red light on a BlackBerry.
Yeah, no, or like I worked in manufacturing, so we had the same thing, just without the beautiful banking salaries behind it. So.
But it is quite interesting. I was talking to someone in banking, and they said the services business, lawyers, bankers, has never been busier in their entire career. Like this is the busiest time, Q1 2021, that they have ever seen.
So how about you, Jordan? What did you work on yesterday or earlier this week?
Similar to Neil, it's a tough question for me right now. I'm in between roles. So in banking, one of the unique things is when you go in between banks, they essentially have a cool down period called a garden leave. Kind of given the amount of quote unquote inside information you have, they essentially want you on the sidelines for some period of weeks or months before joining. So that's where I am right now. So I'll be joining the new firm in a few weeks. So yesterday, much like Neil, was around the house and work on the condo, was in Home Depot twice, out at Target. So remodeling around here, getting the place ready in Atlanta. So very atypical for banking, but one of the benefits is when you leave firms, you do get some time off. Kind of rewinding back to when I was there. So I agree, it's the busiest time, at least in my kind of short career in finance, and a lot of the senior folks I work with kind of reiterate the same thing, combination of really strong capital markets, a lot of kind of startups that were started within the last 3 to 5 years of becoming mature and trying to figure out how do I monetize, how do I exit. This product called a SPAC, which effectively is kind of a backdoor way to get into IPOs, has kind of really taken markets by storm. And a SPAC is a combination of an M&A transaction and an IPO. And we had an industry where you had 10 of these per year for a very long time. And I think year to date, we're up to 300. So it's kind of keeping everyone, lawyers, consultants, auditors, investment bankers, kind of very, very busy. So up until my time off, it was, I had kind of gone back to the hours as a director that I kind of worked coming out of business school. Things were just so busy. So, up at 8:30, 8 o'clock, kind of checking in client emails from the night before. I worked in healthcare. It's a pretty global practice, even though we're based in New York. So it's kind of getting caught up on things that are happening in kind of Asia and Europe. And then it's 2 hours of, responding to emails, planning out the day, and then execution. And then, my afternoons were really spent on, with the treasurer or CFO, walking through points of the deal, if we're selling something, talking to the buy side advisors, and then nights ended somewhere between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., kind of depending on the night.
Speaking of SPAC, I was watching a TikTok video. Someone explained SPAC, saying it's like adopting a baby. Investing in SPAC is like adopting. You don't know what you're going to get. It's a very simplified way of explaining, but yeah, this is like a whole new way of going public. Direct listing is second new way, and then the traditional IPO. But we have been approached by 3 SPACs in like last month alone to de-SPAC. I was like, you're right, that is put $70-80 billion raised in the first quarter alone. Yep. On SPAC.
Yeah, WeWork just went public today via SPAC, or announced an acquisition, and that pace is going to get worse. So the other thing unique about a SPAC is they have a 24-month window where they have to go and find a transaction. Otherwise, they have to liquidate their fund. And the way they're structured is the people who raise SPACs are really incentivized to go and do a transaction. So if you think things are crazy now, fast forward 12 months when people are starting to hit these end of life periods, and you're going to have, 2 or 3 SPACs per day calling you looking for a transaction.
Yeah, I'd say one of the great things for students that are focused in finance and paying very close attention to some of these transitions, or those who are peripherally involved. And sometimes you might be going into finance but not be maybe super up to date on healthcare or energy or the entertainment industry or something. Between our professors and our classmates and our alumni, there are always great sources to help learn about what's going on. So I'm sure we're probably going to have a club event, to try to explain what's going on in the Suez Canal in the next couple of days. As the Energy Club, we put on one a few weeks back with what happened in Texas and why are markets like that. And, those are open to all the students to just sort of come and learn and understand. Because you might have some like me that are diving way deep into energy, or you might have some that are like, well, energy is going to impact what I do, but it might not be everything I do, but I should know a little bit. So there's always there are a lot of interesting resources you have when you're at school that you can take advantage of. So the next question I want to ask to Elliott, a little bit about the transition. So you went from more of an analyst role before business school, and now you're in that post MBA role. And could you maybe talk a little bit about how that's transitioned in the finance space for you and what that means for your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think before I start, if you don't mind, I'm just going to mention that not every, even finance career post MBA has to be 17, 19-hour days and weekends. There are other ways to get where you're going without that potentially. So make sure you do your due diligence on these kind of things, because you get that good sense from alumni and from second years on what it's actually like, rather than just what you kind of read or see out there on the news or Twitter or whatever. A lot of these careers are very time intensive, and it's important to make sure you understand what you're looking at. In terms of the transition between, I guess, my previous role as a credit analyst, I was on the risk management side of things. And so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to go back to get my MBA, was because I wanted to move from risk management onto more of the investment decision-making side of things, more as a portfolio manager. And so the role has definitely shifted from prior to grad school, doing the work and running the models and kind of being down in the details, to, as you kind of progress through after MBA, starting to gain more of a kind of oversight or strategic kind of thinking, not just on one or two things you're working on, but from a kind of team perspective. And I think you get a lot of that at Tepper. I don't think I had a lot of experience with that coming in. There were always a bunch of people above me kind of, monitoring that and coordinating things. Then at Tepper, you get to come in and be, a leader of a club, or, go out and do a competition. And there's of course resources you have, your second years, or the career center, for example. But in a lot of cases, you're kind of calling the shots, right? You're in charge. You're the, on the board of one of the clubs, or on one of the competition teams. You're kind of the one making the decisions and thinking about how things are going to go and seeing that to completion. And so I think that those things are related to what we all end up doing down the road post MBA.
Yeah, that's great. I guess one of the things that you brought up, Elliott, that was great was the, some of the resources. So maybe do you want to talk about a little bit of your experience with the Master's Career Center and how they helped with your transition? Yeah,
definitely. I think it's like there's a couple different, there's the Career Center, and I think the clubs kind of run by the second years, and at least this is what worked for me, and there are different things that work for different people. But the Career Center has seen it all, and has, I think, some great people and some great resources in the different industries that really know what's going on, have their ears to the street, and can kind of point people in the right direction. I think the clubs have that on the ground, real recent experience, like, oh, you're interviewing at X company for this role. Well, I just did that internship. I obviously interviewed for that role of that company, and here's what it's actually like. Let's do a mock interview. Here are the things you need to do. You need to brush up on these technicals. This. You need the presentation style. What kind of tie to wear, those kind of things. Like, you need both of those, and I think they do a great job of complementing each other.
Yeah, that's great. I probably should have asked about GFA in there as well, which is our Graduate Finance Association does a lot of work helping the first years get ready for those finance interviews, as well as quite a few other clubs that finance touches, whether it's operations or tech or entrepreneurship or energy, healthcare. Many students are actually involved in quite a few clubs, so helps a lot. So I guess keep putting in those questions. We'll get to them in just a second. But I think the next one, I guess I'll start with Neil, and then open it up for anybody else to want to add. What is the sort of best career advice that you've been given, maybe before MBA about how to approach your MBA, or even after your MBA of how to build from it?
I don't know if it's the best career advice, but I went to join investment banking without knowing what I was going to do. Like, you kind of you're basically deferring your decision on what you're going to do. And I remember I had classmates who were like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just do what I want to do now. And I didn't have the good fortune of knowing, what was interesting to me. I felt like I was learning everything at the same time. So while I wouldn't trade the training that I got and the experiences I got working at a bank and getting so many, and I am where I am today, and had the experiences of working in a high growth startup because essentially of my Wall Street experiences. I've seen, it was a grueling 5 or 6 years to get to that point, and I wouldn't trade it, but it was probably harder than it needed to be. And maybe if you could do what Kalpesh has done and found something, he's like, hey, I'm gonna do something. I want to be my own boss. I see what I want to work on, and I want to invest my time on that. If you can find a way to do that sooner out of business school, you can save yourself, a lot of time and energy. But I do expect that a lot of career switchers have a hard time doing that, just like I did. And you figure that out in business school. But I did admire my close friends who were very passionate about something and just kind of jumped into what they cared about right away. And it allowed them to skip some steps, I think.
Awesome. Kalpesh, do you have any advice that you would have either?
Yeah, I think the best advice I got was just be authentic. People are sort of trying to fit to a mold or have these sort of model behavior to get something, and I think it shows through when you are trying to be something you're not. And I think it has served me well all along in my life is be authentic.
I would add just a bit, I don't know if I ever got it as advice, but I'm sure it was in there, and I'm sure it was always implied, which is get exposure to many things as you can. And so interestingly, I think a lot of us sounds like we have a lot of deal experience, right? So at least for me, investment banking and then venture capital, spent a lot of time doing deal work. And I was like, oh, I need deal experience. And I got a decade of that and I'm done. But I actually pulled out my old pricing book. It was actually my husband's pricing book. He's also class of 2008. But from Tepper, because I was trying to solve a pricing problem at my current company, because I'm doing operational finance as opposed to deal finance. And I'm like, oh right, pricing, right? I remember taking that class. I learned a few things. The other thing that I'm working on most closely now with my boss, who's our CEO, is organizational structure. How do you think about optimizing the organizational structure of a small to mid-sized company to set us up for growth? So it's like, you weren't thinking of that when you're in school, because you're like, I need to get all those finance and accounting classes under my belt to make sure that I'm ready to go into you know, whether it be a banking or FP&A type of role, but all the other stuff actually has a pretty big impact. You never know when you're going to use it.
Good to hear. I also want to ask, what is it that inspires you the most about your job? What is it that motivates you to get up and tackle the work every day? I'll start with Jordan.
For me, a couple of things. I think one is it's the problem solving, and you know the good thing about Wall Street is it's experience to really complex problems every day with really smart people or experienced people, I'll say, right? You know, you're working with, you know, executives, C-suite people on a day-to-day basis, and being able to kind of hear problems that they have and help them get to solutions. That's what appealed to me, right? It was the engineering, was the analytical background. I approached it as problems that, you know, that my tool set, you know, it's not variables, not laws of physics. My tool set are capital markets and corporate finance and the rules of accounting. So to me, that's the main thing is I get up every day excited to be like, there's a problem that somebody has and I'm going to have to find a way to fix it. I think the other part is just the wide range of experiences and people that I've gotten exposure to, you know, even early on in my banking career, right? For me, you know, a handful of years out of business school, I'm flying around with heads of companies and chairmen of this and that, and kind of just listening to their stories and listening to, you know, what interests them and things that, you know, the personal side of things that, you know, that people don't talk about, right? So it's really building those relationships outside of the, you know, of a video conference these days or outside of the boardroom and really getting to meet interesting people. So those are the two things that really drive things for me and kind of make me get up and get excited about the job.
Awesome. Neil, do you have anything else that gets you excited about the job?
At Indigo, when there were just 10 or 15 people there, and then now it grew into, you know, a very large company. We were really driven by our mission to change the industry, the agriculture industry, for the better. And Indigo's mission is to, you know, change the arc of climate change. We had really very, very large ambitions to change an age-old industry. And being a part of, it was like not even like having a job. It was like being a part of a movement. And that changed my perspective in what kind of a job could be like. So when we would wake up, it wasn't like, you know, I wasn't going through a to-do list. Like we were like going to battle with comrades to change the industry for the better and hopefully impact the planet. So that was really motivating. And I think that it'll be very influential in my decision-making as I think about what to do next. I will probably stray away from things that feel like they have a 9-to-5 aspect to it and are more like a continuum. Like, you know, it's something that I do that fits into work and life kind of blend together. And if you're making an impact, I think it allows you to do that.
Yeah, I think, you know, entrepreneurship is a calling. So, you know, I think some people talk about passion, you know, and what, you know, do what you're passionate about. I think passion is a little more overrated, you know, can be a passionate artist and, you know, can't put food on the table. So I think to me, it's more about mission or purpose, right? You know, why? You ask that question, why? You know, why you're doing something you're doing. And, you know, we're all born, I read somewhere, time billionaire, you know, we all have, if you have 80 years of life, it's 2.5 billion seconds, you know, and, you know, why are you spending time on something is a critical question to ask. And what's the purpose of this? And all of us, I think there's a job, there's a profession, and there's a calling, right? So, you know, somebody talked about 8 or 10 hours, or, you know, you can succeed. I just think that if you are serious about something, you're going to get into it and spend more time. It's not because somebody else is asking you. We started by saying, oh, investment bankers have to work 16 hours a day or something. If you like and if you're starting to get into it, you will spend more time than, you know, your 9-to-5 job. So I think that is a career path that most MBAs, if you're doing an MBA, you're ambitious, right? You will gravitate towards spending more time and building that purpose.
That makes a lot of sense. I want to switch to an attendee question here. We've got a couple of questions coming in about finance certifications. If there are any you guys have pursued personally, how valuable you found them, things you might recommend. I'll start with Anisha.
Sure. So I would say, I don't know, there was a few of my sort of friends and colleagues, at least in my year, they were looking at getting their CFA. And so I drank a little bit of that Kool-Aid, ended up taking the level 1 test. I would say for me, it was also a little bit of insurance. I was a career switcher. My background clearly was on the consulting side, and I, like a lot of people, I also have a background in engineering, so that's my degree. And so I was going into finance. And so I was also entering in 2008. So if you remember what happened in 2008, Bear Stearns collapsed at the early part of 2008. Lehman Brothers, within 2 weeks of me starting within my group at Credit Suisse. So it was quite a interesting time to start in Wall Street finance. And so I kind of looked at it as just another sort of qualification that I could have just to sort of validate the fact that, I had the kind of finance background. I didn't end up pursuing it any further. I feel like people who might be more in asset management and things like that may be better, better need to hold something like a CFA, but I did the level 1. I know a lot of other Tepper grads, I think, did all levels. So.
And Kalpesh, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I think there was an age-old debate. I started in equity research on Wall Street, and it was like, you need a CFA if you want to go work on the buy side or, do this and that. And, CFA is like getting a PhD in finance or something. And MBA is kind of lightweight finance, if you will. And, I really believe that we've moved 20 years past, and I'm in fintech. So this credentialing yourself is also overrated, right? People come with all sorts of extension next to their name, right? MBA, CFA, PhD, whatever. And you have these Wall Street bets and roaring kitties, and they are driving the market now, and the SPACs. So you sort of, I believe in the movement. If you look at finance now, it's a DeFi movement. The Bitcoin is part of that movement. Quantitative hedge funds are hurting. That's part of that movement. Is a decentralized finance. The knowledge of finance is available to anyone who wants to learn. You can go to Khan Academy and learn about options, and you don't need to go and get an MBA. So I think the big value of MBA to me is that the network you're going to build and learn from different cultures and different backgrounds of people. I look at 31 attendees here, and we had classmates from probably 50 different countries. And the things you will learn, and I apply that even in my current role, where you work with people with different cultural background, different personalities, different motivations, and how do you get people to agree to do something and advance the ball forward? That's more, I think, than getting this sort of knowledge skills, if you will.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And sort of in that vein, Tepper can create an amazing network and has an amazing alumni network. Do you have advice for, how best to utilize that network, how best to get what you're trying to get to where you're trying to get by utilizing those resources? Elliott, I'll start with you.
I think for me, it starts when you're there as a first year and you've got your second years, and maybe the people that have recently graduated still come back for back when I was doing it, certainly in-person things, maybe they're webinars now, but those are the people that I think you start with, and they have the most recent experience and a lot of the kind of roles in the fields that you're looking at, and kind of just by nature of that, you start coming in contact with, although you have to initiate it with, additional alumni out there, right? So you've got your second years that are in banking, and they had their, people they reached out to that were second years, and then there's a director at this bank and an MD here. And when the banking kids would go to New York, they'd all try to talk to all those different people. And we had the same kind of thing to a smaller degree in the asset management space, just because things are a little bit more spread out. Although there were a number at a couple of different firms in Pittsburgh, which is convenient. But really, you just have to take the initiative and reach out once you have a little bit more of a firm grasp on what you want to do and what they do, and kind of what you want to get out of it, right? I think networking can't just be like, hey, how do I get your job kind of thing. It needs to be more of a, I'm interested in the path that you took, what you've learned, kind of advice you have, and build into it from there.
That makes a lot of sense. Jordan, would you have anything to add on the networking advice side?
Yeah, no, I agree that it starts kind of day one with the folks that you are in class with. I mean, even to this day, some of my closest friends, as I start, I'm getting married later this year and putting together the wedding list, are folks who I met, in business school. We stayed, incredibly close. I think the other thing that people don't appreciate is, the shared experience makes the alumni network kind of very valuable. And though it's smaller than some of the other schools, what I found out is that people are a lot more open to spending real time with people if you ask for it. So it was both me when I ended up in banking, I kind of played around with VC, I looked at some tech roles, and almost everyone I reached out to, was willing to give me real time and kind of real feedback and real opportunities sometimes. And that was surprising. And you just need to, be prepared, do the research, and come with an ask. I think that's the one thing that people miss is, as I continue to work with kind of current and past students is, Tepper folks are really smart and come from great backgrounds, but sometimes they kind of miss the ask of how do I continue this forward? And the ask sometimes is just say, is there someone else who you can introduce me to help me strengthen my relationship, to help me increase my learning about X, Y, Z? So it's a skill that you kind of start practicing day one, but I encourage people to continue and utilize the alumni network. As Kalpesh says, it's less about credentials, more about kind of the access and exposure to people. And we have a great and really kind of strong alumni base of rich experiences. I want people to kind of continue to utilize that because this makes the brand stronger for everyone and we all benefit.
So I just add to what Jordan was saying on alumni. I got my first job from CMU through an alum. My first check for my fund from an alum. My first check from my company from an alum. And, I was volunteer for the 50th anniversary of GSI at that time in Tepper. And I had a car, so I chauffeured people around for the weekend. All the important dignitaries who came for the 50th anniversary to speak and, attend. And through that, I got my first job. And then a few years later, I was starting a fund. I got my first investment through an alum at Excel, whose Schwartz Center is named after. My company was started, and the Schwartz company, Excel, invested in my company. So I always believe, like, anytime a student calls me, I test their persistence a little bit, 3 or 4 times, but I do respond, email, calls. So, that sort of a paid forward culture exists, and we should all take advantage of it.
I just want to add to that. Jordan mentioned this as well. It's like there's other business schools out there that will have huge alumni networks, and like they're so big and so broad. But I feel like because actually the Tepper alumni network and your class experience is so much, you're so much closer and so much tighter with your classmates, it ends up being, I think, a lot richer of an alumni network. Alumni are willing to go a lot further to help you out, spend time with you, pull you through. Because it is so much tighter. So I'd say it benefited me, Neil. I think probably you as well, at least for CS. But just kind of throughout my career, it's like they're always going to pick up the phone because there are so few of us. not so few, but less of us out there, that it's not people reaching out to hundreds of folks. That they're reaching out to you is because they really want to have the conversation.
I think that's really great to hear. I did want to ask, so we've talked a little bit about SPACs and about Wall Street bets and things that are really trending and having a big impact on the industry right now. Where do you see the industry kind of going in the next 5 to 10 years? How do you see things changing, staying the same? I'll start with Neil.
Is that in specific to a specific industry, the industry that I'm familiar with?
The industry that you're familiar with would be perfect.
The industry that I'm coming out of agriculture. I was in healthcare, but the industry that I'm coming out of agriculture is a remarkable industry. It's been the same. It's been operated the same for thousands of years, and then there's kind of some new technologies that were introduced 60 or 70 years ago, and unlike most other industries that have a rich ecosystem of venture capital and innovation, that hasn't been true in agriculture. And that's in the last 5 years, which happened to be around the time that Indigo was getting started up, things changed remarkably. And so now you're seeing lots of venture dollars and even private equity dollars going into the space. And I think you're going to see a huge amount of innovation and the digitization of the industry in various ways. So it's not the first place that people think of to kind of look for a job, but I kind of fell in love with it. And it was really cool to be operating in a place where no one really is, the tech industry is just so competitive, but the agriculture industry is not. And it was really cool to be operating in a space that was really wide open like that. I think we're on the beginning of a very long runway of innovation in agriculture.
Very cool. Kalpesh, do you have any thoughts on where industry will kind of go in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think my view is that every job is a sales job and every company is a tech company now. So, COVID brought this to the forefront. How do you do sales? If you're a student, you're selling yourself to an employer. If you acquire sales skills, in any environment, you're going to be valuable. And then companies, I think, I'm in fintech and finance, and I think DeFi is a big theme. It's a 20-year theme, decentralized finance, what I call DeFi movement, which just started when we were all sitting at home in COVID and people getting the stimmy checks and now investing in the stock market, through Robinhood and other avenues. So that movement, not believing in central banks and having digital currencies, and there's a whole new field that is starting where people are questioning traditional finance and traditional institutions and traditional way of raising money, investing money, saving money, and spending money. So if you think of sort of the 4 buckets of save, spend, invest, earn, everything is changing, and and technology and sort of democratization is happening in finance. So when you're coming out of college, don't think of it as, I need to get a job at Goldman Sachs. Or, think outside the box, because if you have that passion and you've sort of learned about the new ways of doing things, you'll be valuable to Goldman Sachs as well, right? So, just having that traditional knowledge of discarded cash flow or, option pricing in Black-Scholes, those things are good, but, in learning about behavioral finance, which is, again, the DeFi movement, is going to be very valuable from the standpoint of industry.
That makes a lot of sense for looking into the future. We have another attendee question here asking, sort of in the lines, Anisha, you shared earlier, dusting off like your old pricing books. What are other things that maybe you learned through the MBA program that you're not sure you would have otherwise? Things that you ended up using in your job that maybe you wouldn't have been exposed to without the MBA? I'll start with Elliott.
Well, I'm not sure I have an example off the top of my head of something that I necessarily learned that I wouldn't have, that I used. But one thing I would say is I learned a lot of things that I wouldn't have otherwise. And that was because though I was certainly had a finance background and I was going into finance, one of the things that I definitely recommend is, particularly in your second year, once you're kind of done with the base layer of classes that you're going to need for things like interviews and recruiting, taking some classes in something that you're not going to necessarily need directly for your job, or maybe at least don't think you're going to need. So I went a little lighter on the finance classes than someone might have that was going into finance. Part of that was because of my background, but we've got, world-class professors at CMU in all kinds of different fields. So I took some classes in the operations space on pricing and optimization and real options, and some data management and data analysis things. And some of that data work actually has been handy for my role in a more quantitative position than I initially thought I was going to end up in. But taking a couple classes that might not be exactly what you think you need for the first role right out of MBA, but that something you're never going to get a chance to learn from someone like the professors and the students in that kind of class, I think is a good thing to keep in mind.
I took acting for business at CFA, so that was good class.
I have heard nothing but good things about the acting for business class. It's on my list for next year for sure. We have another attendee question here. Is there anything that surprised you in your roles after graduating that you weren't sort of aware of or didn't think of before starting in the role? Jordan, I'll start with you.
Nothing immediately. I mean, I think banking is one of those kind of tried and true paths, and I think the GFA did a really good job of kind of prepping me for what to understand. I think broadly, people's experience of banking, while different firms, different groups, is very similar. And so I had a great group of second years who kind of, second years and as recent grads who really kind of laid out, it's not all glitz and glam. It's not all, oh, I'm working on the big M&A deals all the time. That, a lot of it is just kind of mundane, blocking and tackling and pitch books and data rooms and, a lot more administrative related things than you would expect. I think the part that did surprise me is just how much my work allows me kind of to talk and interact with so many people. So it's less about the actual job, but more about, the thing about banking is it's a broad skill set. It's, corporate finance is important to all companies and kind of all industries. And so it gives you a language where you can really speak intelligently to a lot of people, even outside of the industry that you focus on. So I think that surprised me, is just kind of how broad that skills went, and also how many people were kind of interested in the background. So while myself, I've not left banking, the number of doors it kind of opened for kind of friends of mine, opportunities that have come my way, kind of did surprise me.
So with that, I just wanted to say thank you to all of the alumni for joining us today. We have a few more AMA events, both some with our alumni as well as some with our current students as well, coming up throughout the rest of sort of April or March and April going forward before summer break. So we definitely want to invite you to join us again.